So hello everyone. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. John McMackin, Associate Professor at DCU Business School and leading voice in the evolving world of HR and leadership. John holds a PhD from the University of Oregon and an MBA from Columbia Business School. He has been instrumental in shaping executive education at DCU. And his recent research, including the groundbreaking article on Skills First HR published in Organizational Dynamics, is helping organizations reimagine talent strategies for the future of work. John, welcome to the Talent Fix. Delighted to have you for the next 20 minutes or so just to chat about this important piece. And as chair of Rent a Recruiter and also the Dublin Regional Skills Forum, I'm particularly interested in this area. So thanks so much for joining us. John, if we can kick off with kind of skills versus experience in hiring. I mean, your research emphasizes a shift in approach from traditional based, job-based hiring to a skills-first approach. How should recruiters kind of balance skills and experience and formal qualifications when assessing candidates?
Sure. Thanks for having me along, Barry. Delighted to any time to discuss skills. It's my passion and the research side of my work, and indeed in teaching now. So, I think there's a danger of being absolutist in commenting on skills. Where it's like, let's get rid of the job and
Sure.
replace everything with skills-based or skills-based work. That's impractical and inappropriate as well. So in some context, qualifications are essential. Obviously, the professions in pharma, there's a requirement, a regulatory requirement for qualified people with formal certification. So even that highlights the fact that you can't be absolutist about it. What we're kind of I suppose suggesting is that it may be worthwhile to consider the question of the practices we've used in the past to hire people. So on any job description, you'll see the first things you'll see are qualifications and experience. And if in some cases there'll be skills as well, in a lot of cases, I suppose what the research around skills is asking whether in fact those requirements reflect the needs for predict performance in the job. And research shows that skills are a better predictor of performance, a much better predictor of performance than qualifications. And qualifications certainly. Experience, it depends on the experience because how we acquire skills through experience. So if you have relevant experience and that has helped you develop the skills for the job, then great. But some experience is just the same experience over and over again. You're not learning anything new. And so that having more of that is of little value. So we've tended, I think, traditionally to overemphasize experience and qualifications at the expense of skills, and we're not proposing jettisoning anything here, jettisoning anything here, but we are suggesting a re-examination.
Looking at it again. So it's not about throwing what we're doing or what we've done in the bin, but maybe looking at adopting the skills first approach. So we're talking to our audience as HR leaders, HR managers. So let's dive into the practicalities. So let's say, you mentioned there a really important fact that skills is a better predictor of future performance, which is what HR managers and what hiring managers are all about. So how can companies and HR managers implement a skills first approach?
Right. Well, without being pessimistic, with some difficulty, as it turns out, it's not an easy thing to do. And in the research that we reported in the article or reference, that was all conducted. We deliberately targeted multinationals because our sense at the time we were starting the research was that they were the ones who were actively doing things in this space. We needed stories from people who were doing things. So but it's not to suggest that every organization from SMEs to large Irish-based organizations that's the standard. But what we found in the research is that there are building blocks there, and that's how we summarize it in the article. And those building blocks are a taxonomy. So in order for to create the kind of mobility within your organization that is essential for hiring internally, you need to have a shared language. So if you're working in I used to work in banking, so there'd be an investment banking division and a retail banking division, and we never used the same language to describe skills. So if you were working in investment banking and you were at level 3 and whatever skills profile we had, you weren't transferable to the retail bank because they had a completely different taxonomy, a way of describing, defining what skills you have, and assessing the levels of those skills. So that meant that there was almost no mobility between those divisions of the organization. And so if you're hoping, that was an internally created barrier, really. We use the analogy in at times of, it's kind of like getting Dermot Bannon in to redesign your house, where you have an old-fashioned house with, front rooms and middle rooms and back rooms and walls everywhere, and he'll come in and clear it all out and create a space where you can move around in a much more open fashion. And so another of the building blocks is that kind of organizational architecture. You need to remove the barriers to mobility in the organization. It's not just about creating things.
Okay. I just want to jump in on a point there you talked about, which I think is really important, and it's this idea of shared language. And when we talk about shared language and skills, we talk about this taxonomy, this idea of a taxonomy or an inventory of skills. And there's a much broader problem in that. I'm sure you're not advocating for each company to have their own taxonomy for skills, but we all need to agree on a taxonomy that we can use. So if we look at ESCO, for example, the European skills taxonomy, they list maybe just under 14,000 skills, I think. But if I look at LinkedIn, which is obviously a very commonly used platform, I think there's 40,000 skills listed. Of which some aren't skills. I think I saw kind of on some platforms accountant listed as a skill, which isn't a skill, obviously. So how can we overcome that? And does the research point to any any kind of recommendations maybe a HR manager can draw from to overcome this challenge?
I think it's a great question, and it's a key question for every organization that's looking to move down this road. I think that there are one of the things that's clear from the organizations we've spoken to and other research on this is that designing your own is probably impractical. It's a huge amount of resource and for relatively little upside. So then you're saying, okay, well, there are a lot of different publicly available taxonomies, including the World Economic Forum, ESCO, and bunches of others. And so I think the start point really would be to have a look at some of those and say, look, which of these is really practical from our point of view? The other thing that we hadn't covered as much in the research that didn't come through in our conversations, but since then in talking to organizations, that large organizations have these large enterprise systems, which in themselves have like Workday or I can't remember the names of the other ones, but there's bunches of them. So I don't mean to say that it's Workday only, but Workday is often referenced and people say, well, we have Workday and we have to use the Workday model, right? So because it's built in, there's a skills element in the Workday system, and part of the journey is opening that up and starting to use it. So you can tailor it internally, but again, what we hadn't anticipated, I think one of the things that people will encounter is saying, okay, well, what IT system do we have, and what does that accommodate in terms of how we capture skills, in terms of definitions, in terms of levels and so forth, and how many skills and so forth. Does it already have a skills taxonomy built into it, and is that the organizational standard? So there are interrelated things there between the taxonomy and the technical system. If I could say one other thing on that, is that really what we're hearing is that the people who've gained traction are really not starting by trying to persuade the whole organization, if it's a large organization or multi-divisional, persuading everybody to accept some sort of global taxonomy, because there's resistance to that for all sorts of reasons. It's seen as a HR initiative. It's seen as maybe moving power from the regions to the center and so forth. There was all sorts of stuff came up in our interviews. So what we
Sorry, John, can I just ask you, I'm just interested in that because it would seem beneficial for everyone to adopt an agreed, taxonomy
Yeah.
that we can all sign off on. So can you just talk to me a bit about what is the resistance to that?
Yeah, the resistance I think that we've has been, and in fact, I was only talking to a CHRO that would participate in the study, came back to talk to me and said, "Look, I'm hitting a real roadblock on implementing the skills thing," and we thought we were flying, and it was that a new director of operations for the organisation came in and said, "I don't want us sharing the skills information with the employees."
Mm.
Now, the whole point of it really was to share it with the employees so that they could be self-directed in identifying mobility opportunities in the organization.
Mm.
The whole thing was kind of premised on that. The business case was premised on that. But she said that this person doesn't agree with that.
What was the issue with sharing the info?
Yeah. So that's, I mean, you can just run into these cultural or mindset roadblocks. But the one that I've referenced in terms of power, I think there is a give up of power if you give the information to the employees. There's a give up of power for middle managers in that. If you as an employee are able to go onto the system and identify opportunities elsewhere in the organization and start.
Okay. So
Yeah,
it's a bigger
yeah,
picture. It's more like a resistance to that idea of internal mobility.
yeah,
And it's this
yeah.
idea of a fear from those middle managers, senior managers of potentially losing team members.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're a
Yeah.
star performer for me, I don't really want you identifying opportunities elsewhere in the organization. No
Okay.
more than I want you identifying opportunities outside it.
Okay.
But of course, that's what happens. If you don't give them the opportunities internally, they go outside, they go to
Yeah.
another organization. So it's not like you can keep people.
Yeah.
So it is complicated, but the what is working is to really to pilot the thing rather than trying to get everybody in the organization to sign up. That you say identify a part of the organization where there's real pain in terms of trying to adequately resource in a strategic way the growth of the business, whether that's in tech and AI, in it may not be in either of those, in operations management, whatever it is, in nursing, in a hospital. So you target an area where there's real pain and say, we're going to just pilot a skills-based approach there. And introduce it, and it's a kind of a stalking horse for demonstrating the use case, showing that you get better returns, and the research will support this, that you get internally hired people are more productive, they're cheaper to hire, they're generally paid less, which is simply because of the negotiation process of hiring somebody externally. And so there's no doubt that the business case will emerge if you can manage to
Yeah.
implement the skills.
No, it's quite strong for kind of the internal talent marketplace, isn't it? There is data to show
Yeah.
that it's there's no point hiring through one door and having massive turnover out another door if you can avoid it.
No, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. But let's talk about coming back to more the practicalities in recruiting, and using the skills first approach. So one of the big challenges when it comes to skills first HR is kind of accurately measuring and validating the skills. So from
Yeah.
a recruitment perspective, what are the most effective ways to assess a candidate's skill beyond kind of the traditional CVs and interview approach?
Yeah. Well, that's tricky because it depends very much on the type of technical skills. There are tools out there and specialist organizations which will provide you with an assessment or put people through an assessment and tell you what level of technical skills they have against some sort of accepted standard. The difficulty comes with transversal skills, really, with interpersonal skills, with the ones that are most important for managerial work or indeed for supervisory work. And in fact, with the growth of AI, the skills, the critical thinking, how do you evaluate critical thinking as a skill? It's highlighted as the top skill for almost all roles for the future, and yet there's no standardized way of assessing that. So what was happening in the organizations we talked to in terms of assessment was most of them were piloting with self-assessment. And obviously that has limitations. You may think you're you're a level. Now, self-assessment using a set of definitions and behavioral indicators. So the better the behavioral indicators, the more clearly framed they are, the more likely it is that the self-assessments will be accurate. So if you've really clear indicators to say, look, if you're at level 3, you should be already doing X, Y, and Z, or able to do it. Then you're unlikely to say I'm level 5 because I like level 5. In fact, the research suggests that people tend to underestimate their skills rather than overestimate them, all other things being equal. And that's because they don't want to give up on development opportunities, and they don't want to end up in a job they can't do. So there's a case for self-assessment. Then others are using the elements of the performance management process to kind of have a conversation and say, look, yeah, you put yourself down as level 4. I don't think you're really there yet. And you'd have better opportunities if we put you at level 3, and then we'll help you with development of level 4. So that kind of relatively softly. Now there are keystroke based assessments of, again, but it's technical skills. Obviously, it's difficult to assess critical thinking using keystrokes. I haven't seen anybody come up with a way to do that.
Not yet. Maybe AI will solve that.
Well, this is it. Yeah, I'm certainly no expert on AI. I'm struggling to write prompts, although the students are very good at it, as far as I can see.
Sure. They have to be. Yeah. They have to be. Very good. Okay, so in terms of, let's just bring it back a step further, and kind of with my SME hat. I mean, certainly, obviously, from a recruiting perspective, we support a lot of SMEs. They outsource their recruitment piece to us, but in Rent a Recruiter. But also from a DRSF perspective, Dublin Regional Skills Forum. Really one of our key mission in the forum is to advance the skills agenda among SMEs. Yeah. But if I bring it back to the very beginning, if an SME is hiring for somebody or hiring to fill a vacancy, how do they know? Where do they start in terms of understanding what skills are needed for a particular job?
Yeah. Well, I think where you'd start is with the people who are doing the job, and ask them. That's where I'd start. But I think I'd also start with having the confidence as an organization, SMEs or otherwise, to say, look, do we really need people with, a lot of organizations are saying, well, you have to have a 3rd level degree. Now, from a university point of view, that's not something we're going to argue about. But realistically, you see a lot of jobs advertised, a 3rd level degree, first class honours required, something, it's completely no relevance to the role that you can identify at all. So I think that maybe having the confidence to re-examine what's really needed to deliver performance in the job. Have a look at the people who are delivering performance. Was it their qualifications? Was it their experience? Or was it their core skills? And if so, that delivered that performance, that enabled them to deliver high performance in the role. And if so, then working back from that, ask them to articulate what they think the skills are, or maybe through observation. There's a whole series of techniques you can use, but if you're not talking about, even if you can zero in on a few critical roles, which, and again, that's a kind of a talent management mindset, is that there are some roles that are more critical than others to the delivery of value for your customers, then I'm recognizing what those are and investing in breaking down what skills are required. And so in recruitment, I think you have to work with the organization, whether you're external or internal, you have to work with the people who are doing the work to identify the skills. And if they just get a bog standard job description, which is mostly, can somebody fill that out? And it's like, well, it has almost pre-filled out qualifications and experience and whatever. Really look at that and say, you know what, are we just restricting the pool of applicants here unnecessarily by doing that? And depriving ourselves of people who could do a fantastic job in this role if we give them help them with the training they need to do it.
Yeah, no, 100%. There's lots of inefficiencies in the recruitment process that we see with our clients, and right up at the top of the list would be the job description. And I think investing time in the job description, the amount of generic job descriptions that we see, and I totally agree with you that, and really not a huge amount of consideration. They're, putting in kind of barriers to applications like, third level degree. But then there's also unconscious bias as well, potentially with hiring managers preferring certain universities over other
Oh,
universities.
absolutely. Yeah, that's what I had a degree, so I think they should have one too, right?
Exactly,
And
from a
it
certain
is similar
university,
to me effects.
potentially.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Where they want and carrying on the bias, they want employees from certain companies. So I think 100%.
Right.
So really kind of re-examining that is a great first step. So John, look, I think we're doing a great job covering a huge, very broad subject and a whistle stop tour through your research.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So thanks
Yeah,
so
yeah.
much. But I do want to finish just with one idea that I was interested in your research, and it's that idea of a skills passport. And this
Oh,
idea
yes.
that
Yeah.
companies are building employee skills passports as living records of capabilities to match with opportunities, both internally and externally.
Yeah.
I suppose just by way of bringing the podcast to a close, could you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I really liked the language and the I suppose it reflects a culture of empowerment, really, where you're saying, you
Yes.
know what, this does, and for some organizations this will be a change which will encounter resistance, but it is saying, we're going to give the employees the information and a validation of that information that says you have these skills. This means that you can now travel within our internal mobility system, or at least more likely identify perhaps adjacent roles where you have 80% of the requirements that you have in your passport, and now you can add to that. So this is a very empowering thing. I think it's a very positive thing. It's a very great way to retain good people, and to generate that internal pool of applicants that you hope to have. Without that empowerment, it's difficult to see how you can realize the benefits of a skill-first approach. So if your organization is not disposed to share that kind of information and to give people those passports, I'm not sure the business case for investing in skills first in all the work needed to create it is going to be justifiable. And so I do think it's the passport, that vision of the passport, is one that should carry the initiative. But if the organization isn't going to commit to doing that from the beginning, then you have to say, well, is this the right thing for us? Maybe there are other ways to achieve this.
Fantastic. Okay, I think that's a great way to bring us to a close for this episode. John, can you share just where people can see the research if they want to read more about it?
Absolutely, yeah. That particular article, there's a couple of professional reports, but they're a bit longer. But the article is open access, which is great. So you don't have to pay for any journals or anything. I'll send you a link if that's okay.
Send us the link. We'll put it in the episode link as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's written for a practitioner audience, so there's no academic references in it. It's very easy to read. Mercifully short.
Absolutely, yeah. And into not quite bedtime reading, but almost.
Well, there's a cure for insomnia.
Well, that's true. But look, John, thanks so much for your time, and look, we'll certainly keep in touch because
Please do,
this is a really important issue, and certainly, hopefully, transforming the way we hire and recruit.
Sure.
Thanks again,
Pleasure,
John,
Barry.
and thanks everyone for listening. And check us out where you get your podcasts.